skies, partly cloudy in New York City, 46 degrees. In Central Park, it's 41. In White Plains, 43 in Bridgewater. This is WNYC and WNYC.org at 7:33.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from the Pajamagram Company, offering Hoodie Footy PJs, footed pajamas for warmth and personal style in solids, holiday prints, and Nordic fleece. More at pajamagram.com. And Red Hat, the inspiration behind the book, The Open Organization, from Red Hat CEO Jim Whitehurst, detailing his experiences leading organizations openly and collaboratively. Available online and in stores today.
You're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC. Christmas may be just around the corner, but it doesn't feel like it outside. Temperatures have been pushing into the 60s over the last few days and will still be mild in the 50s today. WNYC's Stephen Nesson looks at how people and trees are responding.
In a sun-drenched Washington Square Park, it's bright and warm, despite a cool wind. Yassine Sanogo studies at NYU and is from southern France. For her, this weather is just fine.
The longer it takes for the snow to come, the better.
For tour guide Linda Sorrell, this kind of weather makes her job so much easier.
For me in particular, it's easier, get around the city and, no snow, no ice, no cold weather. It's nice for everybody.
Make a wonderful day. Merry Christmas to you, sir.
John Round City has been the foreman at Soho Trees for the past 12 seasons.
This is just uncanny. My body is in shock. Really.
As a Christmas tree seller, he's usually ready for any condition, but he acknowledges last week he had to run out and buy an extra t-shirt.
We're used to freezing our butt off out here in 20-degree weather, dealing with the ice, rain, and the snow. And we're happy to do that because it does lend to the feel of Christmas and the attitude, of the customer.
He says sales haven't taken a hit, and his trees, which were recently cut and still fresh, are doing fine in the warm weather. So are a lot of trees in the city, many of which still have their leaves. But Rich Hallett, a research ecologist with the U.S. Forest Service, says if temperatures drop suddenly, there could be problems.
What I worry about is that we shift from basically a summer growing season almost into winter temperatures immediately.
He explains that native trees, like maples, normally use the cool weather to go through a hardening off during the fall. That's the process they go through to adapt to the cold temperatures.
And right now, if they're still a little more physiologically active, if we get a very hard freeze very quickly, I would expect some more frost damage to our trees.
What you got?
Back at Soho Trees, John Round City says a little cool weather wouldn't hurt right about now.
It's wintertime, it's supposed to snow. That's the feeling of Christmas. So, we are hoping the temperatures drop.
Oh, it's coming. How about the low 50s? For WNYC, I'm Stephen Nesson.
In Yemen, a sliver of peace after a year of conflict that's left more than 6,000 people dead and destroyed large swaths of that land. A ceasefire went into effect yesterday after months of Saudi Arabian airstrikes aimed at deposing the Iranian-backed rebel Houthis who have seized power. The hope is that this 7-day truce will allow breathing space for internationally brokered peace talks. For more on the human cost of this war, we're joined from the capital, Sana'a, by Tarek Bosch Bawab. He manages programs in Yemen for Doctors Without Borders. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you there in Yemen are just a day into this ceasefire. What is it like where you are?
Well, for now, it seems that in Sana'a, in the capital, it is holding up. There hasn't been airstrikes last night, so we are cautiously optimistic that the capital will go through a period of rest. In other parts of the country, however, there has been some violations of the ceasefire, but sometimes both sides of the hostilities not feeling bound by the ceasefire declared by, let's say, the higher level authorities. And the problem is that with the long-term conflict now ongoing in the country, there is more and more localized conflicts, and those are much more difficult to breach in terms of ceasefire.
Generally speaking, though, this has been a year of heavy conflict in Yemen. Those Saudi airstrikes have been just unrelenting. What is daily life for civilians trapped in this?
I think you have to realize that, first of all, this was already a very poor country. You have a high level of population, about 28 million people, and therefore the country has always been relying on imports, particularly of cereals. 90% of the food as well that is consumed in the country is imported. And since the month of March and de facto embargo on supplies coming into the country, it has been quite a struggle for everyday people to get their hands and to be sure on their next meal. And at the same time, people are obviously very afraid of aerial bombardments. So kids are traumatized whenever they hear the sound of a motor above their heads. They are quite afraid and want to hide. The whole country is basically getting traumatized and is struggling day to day to survive.
And I gather parts of the country could even be called or have been under a state of siege.
There are actually indeed besieged areas in which it is very difficult to access for ourselves, humanitarian workers, but also, again, day to day for supplies of food, of fuel. Fuel is essential in this country because it allows to pump water. The country is quite dry and there's not a lot of rivers and so on, so fuel is an essential commodity. Fuel is also essential to transport food around the country, and therefore the lack of fuel is really affecting the daily lives of people. Not speaking about hospitals, which are not able to run because their generators are out of fuel. Hospitals are closing down, and there's obviously a lot of unnecessary deaths.
And what about you? Has Doctors Without Borders been able to function in its own hospitals?
Well, over the last 9 months, Yemen has become the main emergency for Doctors Without Borders. It is not easy, of course, to negotiate with the different warring parties. There are still some areas in the country where we are not allowed to access. We do have a substantial number of international staff, and we are helped as well by more than 2,000 Yemeni staff working with us day in and day out. But it's a struggle.
And the rest of the international community, could it be doing more to help?
In March, when the conflict started, or at least the conflict raised in intensity with the entrance of Saudi airplanes, most of the humanitarian community left the country and went to Jordan. The country is close to a breakdown. We are certain with the people that we see every day in the hospitals we support that there's not much coping mechanisms left for this population, and they are quite close to a dramatic catastrophe from a human perspective and a humanitarian perspective.
Tarek Bash Bawab is with Doctors Without Borders. He spoke to us from Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
WNYC receives support from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, publishers of Fast Forward, a book by Melanie Verveer and Kim Azzarelli about how women can combine power and purpose to better themselves and their communities. More at senecawomen.com/fastforward. Paramount Pictures and Regency Enterprises presenting The Big Short, starring Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, and Brad Pitt. The true story of 4 outsiders who helped to uncover the biggest fraud in U.S. history. Now playing in select theaters.
You're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC. Just ahead, WNYC's Note to Self asks one of their favorite technology and culture critics to pick 5 stories for your year-end listening pleasure. It's coming up in about 10 minutes. We're going to have sunny skies this morning, then a mix of sun and clouds later in the day, getting up into the lower 50s, and then tonight will be cloudy with areas of drizzle and fog and overnight lows in the mid-40s. Right now, it's partly cloudy in New York City, 46 degrees in Central Park, 42 in Morristown at 7:42.
At WNYC, we love NPR News as much as you do. That's why we bring it to you every day.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. House Speaker Paul Ryan has begun promoting a $1 trillion tax and spending package agreed to by congressional leaders and the White House. NPR's Dave Pignanelli joins us. So Ryan held a meeting last night with the House Republican rank and file?
That's right, Dave. It was a closed-door meeting, but lawmakers who attended say Ryan urged his fellow Republicans to accept the package and that he plans to put the tax and spending bills to a vote on Thursday. With the Senate voting by week's end, the deal keeps the government running through September, but lawmakers will have to first pass another stopgap measure. The current one expires at midnight.
That's NPR's Dave Pignanelli. ISIS is the focus for Defense Secretary Ash Carter today. He's in Iraq meeting with U.S. military commanders and Iraqi officials. They're discussing ways to defeat Islamic State militants. Carter was in Turkey yesterday. U.S. airstrikes targeting ISIS are continuing in Iraq and Syria with the help of Britain, France, and other countries. Schools in Pakistan are closed today. The country is marking 1 year since Taliban militants attacked a school in Peshawar. More than 150 people were killed, mostly children. It's a national day of mourning in Pakistan. This afternoon, the Federal Reserve is expected to announce its first hike in interest rates in nearly a decade. The Fed wraps up its latest policy meeting today. I'm Dave Mattingly in Washington.
And this is WNYC in New York at 7:44. Good morning. I'm Satirius Johnson. The head of New York City's beleaguered Homeless Services Agency is stepping down. A mayoral spokeswoman confirms that Gilbert Taylor is leaving his post. Taylor, who was appointed in early 2014, will remain in an advisory position at City Hall. City officials say the department is undergoing a comprehensive review. In a statement, the city says the effort will be led by Human Resources Administration Commissioner Steve Banks and First Deputy Mayor Anthony Shorris. The New York Times reports that Robert Capers has been confirmed as the new U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District. Capers replaces Loretta Lynch, who left to become the U.S. Attorney General. The Eastern District covers Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and Long Island, and it has a track record of prosecuting terror, sex trafficking, and white-collar crimes. Following the new climate deal in Paris, City Controller Scott Stringer says he wants to see New York City's pension system divest from coal. As controller, Stringer oversees the 5 public worker pension funds, which have more than $155 billion in assets. He says the pensions have less than $33 million currently invested in coal. Mayor de Blasio and several city council members have also called on the pension boards to divest from coal. It's going to be sunny this morning, then a mix of sun and clouds with highs reaching the lower 50s. Then tonight, cloudy, some areas of drizzle and fog, and lows in the mid-40s. And for tomorrow, rain and fog in the morning, then just rain in the afternoon with a high near 58. Right now, it's partly cloudy, 46 degrees in New York City. It's 41 in White Plains at 7:45.
There are 58,000 people living in New York City homeless shelters. One of them is Shakira Crawford.
She's 39 years old, living in a single 500 square foot room with 1 bathroom, 2 bunk beds, and 3 kids.
WNYC's special series, The Long Way Home, follows one family through Mayor de Blasio's anti-homelessness program. Hear how they do on Morning Edition and All Things Considered on WNYC.
You're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC. Mayor de Blasio's plan to change city zoning laws to achieve his goal of creating more affordable housing throughout the city is getting considerable pushback. Many local community boards have voted against the proposals, and elected officials are criticizing the plan and calling for changes. Later this morning, the City Planning Commission will be holding a hearing on the issue, and joining me now to talk about what's happening is Sally Goldenberg, senior reporter at Politico New York. Good morning, Sally.
For having me.
You know, what's at stake at today's meeting?
Well, what we're going to hear today is the public is going to weigh in on 2 proposals tied to de Blasio's overall housing plan. So it's not his entire housing plan that's at stake, but it's 2 proposals that he and his officials believe would enable the creation of more low-income housing.
Can you review for us what exactly, the administration is proposing?
Sure. So one of the proposals, called mandatory inclusionary housing, basically requires, if you're a developer and you get permission from the city to rezone land, generally to upzone, to build more density, in exchange for that, that benefit, you have to devote some percentage of your overall units to low to moderate income housing. And there's 3 different options they've laid out, the city's laid out, that, target different income levels. And the other, the other proposal is called Zoning for Quality and Affordability, and that one is a little bit less philosophical. It's sort of rewriting the city's zoning text to make building easier. So in some cases, they're saying the developer doesn't have to build a parking lot if an affordable development is near a subway, or, buildings can be higher than they're already allowed to be in certain areas. Certain senior facilities, assisted living facilities can build larger and more dense than they currently can. So that one is really more about just enabling larger building.
there are a lot of people against these rezoning proposals, housing activists, community board members, elected officials. Why are they against it? And what does it mean for Mayor de Blasio and his affordable housing plan?
Well, I think the reasons people are against it vary, and it's a very New York story. So, in some cases, people just don't like change. They don't want to see their neighborhood changed, regardless of the reason. And I think there's a lot of that. Community boards are pretty often a little bit resistant or concerned about government coming in and saying, I'm going to completely redo your neighborhood the way I think is better. Then you have people who don't, philosophically, they just don't think it's targeting the problem enough. The problem as they see it being not enough housing for low-income people. They think de Blasio is making it, not affordable enough. So he's going to come into a neighborhood, rezone it, like East New York is, the prime example in Brooklyn. It's a very poor neighborhood. He wants to rezone it, and the activists are saying, and residents, it's not just the activists, they're residents in East New York saying the requirements you're going to put on developers still won't keep it affordable for the people who live here. It won't be cheap enough.
And so with all this pushback, what does it say for the mayor's plan? What are the chances?
Well, it all comes down to a vote of the city council next year. So this is all non-binding. It's, it's important, and it's certainly how New York feels on many levels. And I think it shows you that the mayor's team didn't really, early on did not put out a lot of support for this. They didn't roll out, validators and supporters, and early on they've done it recently, sort of in response. But the vote that matters and that will determine this will take place next year by the city council. And so I don't think the council won't support this simply because there's been opposition. I think they're going to, drive their own hard bargain.
All right.
Their own,
Okay, thanks so much, Sally.
All right, thank you for having me.
Sally Goldenberg is a senior reporter at Politico New York. You're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC.
Support for NPR comes from WNYC members and from Progressive Insurance, with insurance for cars, home, boat, motorcycles, RVs, and commercial vehicles at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and Progressive.com. And Inada, Japanese maker of full-body massage chairs, including the Flex 3S, with pre-programmed shiatsu massages and full-body stretch sessions at InadaUSA.com. That's INADAUSA.com.
You're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC. WNYC's Note to Self is just ahead. Show Christmas advice for separated parents. A divorce lawyer offers tips on how to navigate the holidays to ensure sanity and happiness for you and your kids, plus highlights and lowlights from the last Republican debate of the year. It's all coming up this morning at 10 here on WNYC. In the forecast for today, well, we're starting off sunny, and then we'll have a mix of sun and clouds with highs today in the lower 50s. Not quite as warm as it's been, but still pretty mild. And then tonight, cloudy with areas of drizzle and fog and lows in the mid-40s. Right now it's partly cloudy, 46 degrees in New York City at 7:51.
A cheat sheet to the year's top stories that went viral and had the most influence online, from the author of one of my favorite daily newsletters.
So my name is Caitlin Dewey, and I am the digital culture critic at The Washington Post.
Caitlin's newsletter is called Links I Would G-Chat You If We Were Friends. She says she doesn't use any fancy digital tools to find the stories that she cites. She just reads a ton all day long, and she applies this specific criteria.
What is an internet story that appears to be about the internet but is actually about something bigger? That's basically the rubric I'm thinking of.
We asked Caitlin to go back through the approximately 50,000 stories that she linked to all throughout the year and choose her top 3 favorites.